I'm Karen Dillman, pattern designer, longarm quilter, and educator, and I want to share some tips for working with Minky on your longarm. I use Minky all the time, especially for backings, and if you treat it right, it'll work beautifully on your machine. My first tip is to not be afraid, so don't fear the unknown. Another tip is to choose good quality Minky. And whenever possible, especially if you're using that Minky for backing, choose a wide Minky so that you don't have to piece. You probably already know that when you cut Minky, it sheds and it leaves fluffy fibers all over the place. So to keep things clean in your studio, you can do a couple of things like keep a vacuum around. I like to shake out those big pieces of Minky outside to let those fluffs fall off. You can also put a strip of tape on the Minky where you're cutting it to catch all of the cut fibers as you're cutting. But if you do miss some of the mess and you end up with fibers, little fluffy pieces of Minky around your studio, or typically on your leaders is a common place to get it, you can take a rolled up piece of masking tape or strapping tape and pull all of those pieces off. If you don't just have a lint roller. A lint roller works really well also. Always piece the Minky minimally. I don't do a lot of quilts that have pieced Minky tops, but Minky as a backing is really common for my customers to bring me, and so I've done a lot of Minky backed quilts. If at all possible, I ask my customers to bring me a wide Minky as a backing and not piece that backing. Anytime you can avoid the bulky seams that Minky is going to give you, the better off you'll be. If you do have to piece the Minky, like to create a big enough backing for the project, remember that Minky has a nap and it looks different one direction to the other, and you'll want to try to match the nap of the Minky in order to hide the seam as best as possible. When I'm loading a pieced Minky backing onto my longarm, I like the seam of the Minky to run parallel with my bars, so it'll run the length of my quilting frame. That'll not only help me keep things straight, but reduce bulk in just one section of the quilt. Different Minkys have a variable amount of stretch, but it's true across the board that they are stretchy fabrics. Generally, you'll have more stretch in one direction or the other. Along the selvage of the Minky, there's very little stretch, but in the opposite direction, there's a lot of stretch in Minky. When at all possible, you want to attach the stretchy side of the Minky to your leaders. So make sure that is the part that you attach to your leaders, and it'll keep you from stretching or overstretching the fabric between your rollers. You also want to make sure as you're attaching that Minky to your canvas that you're not overstretching it as you attach it. Just lay it nice and relaxed and flat and pin it on or attach it with your favorite method, just nice and flat without stretching it. When you snug the backing on the frame, be sure that you're not over tightening. I actually like a little bit of flop, a little bit of looseness. I don't have a problem with there being kind of a hammock in the backing when I'm using Minky. If you stretch the Minky too much, you might feel like you're making things more stable, but what you're really doing is you're pulling the Minky out of its restful state, and when you release your quilt clamps or when you release your rollers and your canvas, whether you've stitched or not, that Minky is going to go back to its relaxed state. So you can end up with things like curving, curly quilts if you pull the Minky too tight. As long as you're being careful as you roll and you're watching your backing, a little bit of looseness in the Minky isn't going to hurt anything. You don't want your Minky backings super tight on the frame. Keep it loose enough so that it's relaxed. You'll avoid problems with the finished quilt and possibly stitch quality issues while you're quilting. Many quilts that I make with Minky backings don't require a batting. Batting can be nice if you want more definition in the quilting or if you need more warmth or weight in the finished quilt, but because Minky is so thick, when I use it as a backing, sometimes I choose to leave the batting out and have a lighter throw type quilt. Because Minky has long fibers, those fibers can sometimes get pulled to the top of the quilt by the needle and the thread. Usually this can be accentuated or exaggerated when there's a lot of static. To avoid static, you can do things like mist the backing with water to keep it just a little bit wet. You can use an anti-static product also, either on your quilt or on your thread. Sometimes it's difficult to completely avoid those minky threads migrating to the top of your quilt during stitching, so I always use the same color stitching thread as my minky. So with this red minky backing today, I'll be using red on the top of my quilt as well. That way, if small amounts of the minky fibers pull to the top of the quilt, you really won't notice it. Those fibers will generally relax once you're finished quilting and you've shaken the quilt and washed the quilt, and they aren't too noticeable on the top of your quilt. But if you use that same thread color as you have the minky backing, you're not going to notice them even from the beginning. I do a lot of minky backed quilts for my customers, and sometimes quilt tops that are minky as well. I love working with it, and I think you will too. Just keep in mind a few of these tips. Most importantly, don't overstretch or over tighten that minky, and you should be good to go. Thanks for watching. Happy quilting!